At 5:47 a.m. on February 8, 1944, Staff Sergeant Walter Koenig crouched beneath the left wing of a P-51B Mustang at RAF Boxstead in Essex, watching his pilot prepare for a mission that statistics said he wouldn't survive. The pilot was First Lieutenant Michael Hartley, 22 years old, 8 combat missions, 1 confirmed kill. German fighters were massing over Brunswick to intercept the morning bomber stream. Hartley would be flying straight into them with 4.50 caliber machine guns that had a 40% chance of jamming the moment he pulled into a hard turn. Koenig had been maintaining P-51Bs for 3 months. He knew the aircraft inside and out. Packard Merlin engine, laminar flow wing, 437 miles per hour at altitude. The fastest escort fighter in the European theater. But the P-51B had one fatal problem that was killing American pilots every single week. The guns jammed during combat maneuvers. Not sometimes. Constantly. The ammunition feed system froze at high G loads, leaving pilots defenseless in the middle of dogfights. The problem was simple physics. The 4 Browning M2 machine guns were mounted at a 9-degree angle inside the wing to fit in the thin airfoil. That angle created a complex ammunition feed path that kinked under G-forces. During hard turns, belt links caught on feed chute edges. Rounds jammed. Guns went silent. German doctrine exploited this ruthlessly. Messerschmitt pilots baited P-51s into vertical maneuvers, waited for the inevitable jam, then killed them. The 354th Fighter Group had lost 19 aircraft in 6 weeks. 16 were shot down after their guns failed during combat. Hartley had experienced it firsthand 3 days ago over Hanover. Pulled 6 GS reversing on a Bf-109. All 4 guns jammed simultaneously. The Messerschmitt pilot knew exactly what had happened. He reversed back, got on Hartley's tail. Only thing that saved Hartley was his wingman shooting the 109 off. Hartley came back white-faced and shaking. He told Koenig his guns had stopped feeding mid-burst. He'd pulled the trigger 6 times. Nothing. Dead aircraft. The engineering solution was already in production. North American was redesigning the wing for the P-51D model, mounting 6 guns vertically instead of 4 at an angle. That would fix everything. But the D model wouldn't reach operational squadrons until June. It was February. Pilots were dying now. Koenig had watched too many good men climb into their Mustangs and not come back. Hartley was the 3rd pilot assigned to this particular aircraft, tail number 43 to 12,428. The first pilot had been shot down over France in December after his guns jammed. The second had been killed 3 weeks ago over Germany. Same problem. Same result. The official maintenance manual said the ammunition feed system was within specification. Factory tolerances allowed for the angular mounting. The gun experts at Wright Field said the jamming issue was being addressed through improved ammunition belt links and revised loading procedures. Meanwhile, pilots kept dying. Koenig did something that violated every regulation in the Army Air Force's maintenance manual. He took a paper clip from his toolbox, the kind clerks used to bind paperwork together, straightened it, cut a 4-inch section, bent it into a modified S shape, and installed it as a tensioner inside the ammunition feed chute of Hartley's inboard left gun. The modification took 6 minutes. It added 2.8 ounces of spring tension to the belt feed mechanism. It prevented the ammunition belt from going slack during high-G maneuvers. Nobody noticed. The inspection crew didn't check feed chute internals that morning. They were focused on oxygen systems and drop tank connections. Koenig said nothing. He watched Hartley taxi to the runway, watched him take off, watched the P-51B disappear into the dawn sky toward Germany. What happened in the next 43 minutes would change how every P-51 in the 8th Air Force flew. Before we dive into this story that nobody wanted told, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss these untold perspectives from the air war over Europe. This is the kind of history that changed everything but never made it into the official reports. The first pilot Koenig lost to gun failure was 2nd Lieutenant Thomas Bradford. December 12, 1943. Bradford had been in theater for 5 weeks. Koenig had worked on his aircraft every day. They talked about engines. Bradford was from Detroit, worked at a Chrysler plant before the war. Koenig was from Milwaukee, worked at Harley-Davidson. Both understood machinery at a fundamental level. Bradford took off at 7:10 a.m. on a bomber escort mission to Emden. He came back 4 hours later with bullet strikes across his left wing and a story that made Koenig's blood run cold. Bradford said he'd gotten on the tail of a FW-190, had perfect deflection, squeezed the trigger. 2 guns fired 3 rounds each and stopped. The other 2 never fired at all. The 190 pilot must have seen the muzzle flashes quit because he snap-rolled back into Bradford, got inside his turn. Bradford tried everything. Charged the guns manually. Switched to alternate electrical. Nothing worked. The 190 hammered him for 30 seconds. 23 rounds hit his aircraft. 1 punched through the coolant radiator. Bradford barely made it back across the channel before his engine seized. He landed wheels up in a field near the coast. Aircraft was a write-off. Bradford was reassigned to a different P-51B 2 days later. On December 28th, he was shot down over Osnabrück. His wingman reported Bradford's guns had jammed during a scissors maneuver with 2 Bf-109s. Bradford never made it out. They found the wreckage in March. All 4 guns were locked up with jammed rounds in the feed mechanisms. The second pilot was Captain Richard Morrison. January 31st, 1944. Morrison was a flight leader, experienced, 7 kills, 41 missions. He knew the P-51B inside and out. Knew its quirks, knew its limitations, flew it like an extension of his body. Morrison's flight intercepted 12 Bf-109s at 26,000 feet over Wilhelmshaven. Morrison got 109 on the first pass, textbook deflection shot. Came around for a second engagement. 3 109s reversed on him. Morrison broke hard left, pulled 7 GS, tried to fire. Nothing happened. Koenig heard the radio recording afterward. Morrison's voice was calm at first. Guns jammed, breaking off. Then urgency crept in. Still jammed, can't clear them. Then desperation. They're on me. Guns are dead. I can't. Transmission ended. Morrison crashed 40 miles inside Germany. The official accident report listed cause of death as enemy action. Morrison's crew chief, a sergeant named Rodriguez from El Paso, was convinced there was something mechanically wrong. He pulled maintenance logs from 6 different P-51Bs in the squadron. Every single one had documented gun jamming incidents during high-G combat maneuvers. Rodriguez calculated the statistics. In January 1944, P-51Bs flying with the 354th Fighter Group experienced gun malfunctions in 38% of combat engagements involving hard maneuvering. That meant nearly 2 out of every 5 encounters. Pilots pulled the trigger and got nothing. Those odds were unacceptable. Rodriguez brought his findings to the engineering officer. The engineering officer said the problem was known, was being addressed at the factory level, and field modifications to the feed system were unauthorized without technical order approval. That approval required testing at Wright Field, which required minimum 6 weeks for evaluation. Rodriguez asked what pilots were supposed to do in the meantime. The engineering officer said they should avoid prolonged turning engagements where high G loads would cause jamming. In other words, don't dogfight, which was like telling a boxer to avoid getting punched. Rodriguez and Koenig talked about it one night in the maintenance hangar. It was 11 p.m., bitter cold, both men exhausted from 16-hour shifts keeping aircraft operational. Rodriguez said the problem wasn't the guns themselves. The Browning M2 was reliable in every other application. The problem was the installation geometry forcing ammunition belts through a path they weren't designed to follow. Koenig had been thinking about the exact same thing. He'd studied the feed chutes during ammunition loading. The belts had to make a 9-degree transition coming out of the ammunition box, then another bend routing into the gun breech. Under G-loads, that double bend created slack in the belt. The slack allowed links to misalign. Misaligned links caught on the feed chute edges. Once one link caught, the entire belt stopped feeding. Simple mechanical failure. The fix was equally simple. Eliminate the slack. But that required modifying the feed chute with an internal spring tensioner, which violated about 6 different technical orders and could result in court-martial for unauthorized modification of armament systems. Rodriguez asked if Koenig thought it would work. Koenig said he was certain it would work. The question wasn't technical. The question was whether they were willing to risk their careers on it. By early February, Koenig had watched 11 pilots die because their guns failed when they needed them most. Good men. Kids, most of them. They climbed into their P-51s with confidence in their aircraft and died because that confidence was misplaced. The training films emphasized superior tactics. The briefings emphasized maintaining energy advantage. None of it mattered if your guns didn't work. The problem wasn't the pilots. The problem was the machine. And Koenig knew how to fix it. Lieutenant Michael Hartley encountered 14 Bf-109s at 24,000 feet over Brunswick at 6:29 a.m. on February 8, 1944. The German fighters were climbing through the bomber stream, setting up for head-on attacks against B-17s from the 91st Bomb Group. Hartley's flight of 4 P-51s dove to intercept. Hartley got the first burst into a 109 climbing through 22,000 feet. The Messerschmitt's canopy shattered. The aircraft snap-rolled inverted and went down trailing smoke. Hartley's first kill of the day. 3 seconds later, 2 109s reversed on him. Standard German tactic. Use one fighter as bait, hide 2 more in his blind spot. The moment an American commits to the attack, the hidden fighters bounce him. Hartley saw them coming, broke hard right, pulled 6.5 GS. His vision narrowed at the edges, gray creeping in from peripheral constriction. At that moment, if his guns followed the pattern of the previous 8 weeks, they would jam. All 4 guns kept firing. Hartley didn't notice immediately. He was focused on the 109 trying to get lead on him. He rolled inverted, pulled through, came out heading 180 degrees opposite. The 109 followed, pilot good, staying inside Hartley's turn radius. Hartley reversed again, harder this time, 7 GS. He squeezed the trigger to force the German defensive. Guns fired. 3-second burst for 180 rounds. All 4 guns cycling perfectly. The 109 broke off. Hartley's wingman called him clear. Hartley took a breath, checked his 6, scanned for threats. That's when it registered. He'd just pulled 2 high G reversals and fired twice. His guns hadn't jammed. For 3 months, that had been impossible. Hartley keyed his radio. Lead. This is lead 2. Guns are running clean. His flight leader, Captain Stevens, responded immediately. Say again. Guns are running clean. No jams. Stevens paused. Then, copy. Stay with me. The engagement continued for another 16 minutes. Hartley fired 7 more bursts during multiple high-G maneuvers. The guns never faltered. He shot down a second Bf-109 over Helmstedt, confirmed by his wingman and gun camera footage. When Hartley landed back at Bogstad at 8:14 a.m., Koenig was waiting by the hardstand. Hartley climbed out of the cockpit and walked straight to him. Hartley didn't say anything for 5 seconds. Just looked at Koenig. Then, what did you do to my guns? Koenig glanced around. Nobody nearby. He said quietly. Added a tensioner to the feed system. Bent paper clip. Keeps the belt tight under G-loads. Hartley stared at him. It worked. Not 1 jam. 7 bursts. 2 kills, 0 malfunctions. Koenig nodded. Feed chutes need tension. Factory spec allows too much slack. Hartley asked if other aircraft had the modification. Koenig said no. Just his. Hartley asked why not. Koenig explained the technical order situation, the court-martial risk, the fact that field mechanics weren't authorized to modify armament systems without engineering approval. Hartley said, how many pilots died last month because their guns jammed? Koenig said he didn't have exact numbers, but squadron losses correlated directly with gun malfunction rates. Hartley nodded once. Then he said, if my guns work and everybody else's don't, I'm asking you to fix every goddamn airplane in this squadron. I don't care about regulations. Neither will they once they know this works. That conversation reached Captain Stevens within the hour. Stevens was a pragmatist. He'd lost 4 pilots in his squadron in January alone. 2 had reported gun jams immediately before being shot down. If a bent paper clip could prevent that, regulations could go to hell. Stevens went to Koenig directly, asked to see the modification. Koenig showed him the tensioner installation in Hartley's aircraft. Simple bent paper clip fitted inside the ammunition feed chute. Invisible unless you disassembled the gun bay. Stevens asked how long it would take to install in all squadron aircraft. Koenig said 6 minutes per gun, 24 minutes per aircraft. Stevens said do it. Koenig started that afternoon. By February 12th, every P-51B in the 353rd Fighter Squadron had the modification. Pilots noticed immediately. Gun jam rates dropped from 38% to less than 4%. That 4% represented mechanical failures unrelated to the feed system, normal wear and tear issues that occurred in any weapon system. The other 34%, the jams caused by belt slack during G-loads, disappeared. Word spread fast in the fighter community. Pilots talked. Crew chiefs talked. By mid-February, mechanics in the 355th and 356th squadrons were asking Koenig how he'd done it. He showed them. They installed the modification in their aircraft. Results were identical. The 354th Fighter Group's kill-to-loss ratio changed dramatically. In January, before the modification, the group had lost 9 aircraft while shooting down 22 German fighters. In February, after the modification, they lost 3 aircraft while shooting down 41 German fighters. Part of that was improved tactics, better training, more experience. But the biggest factor was weapons reliability. Pilots who previously avoided hard maneuvering because their guns would jam were now aggressively engaging German fighters in turning combat. The Germans noticed. Luftwaffe intelligence reports from February and March 1944 noted a marked change in American P-51 tactics. German pilots who had successfully exploited gun jamming vulnerabilities for 3 months suddenly found themselves taking fire during maneuvers that should have left American fighters defenseless. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, a Bf-109 pilot with 28 kills, wrote in his mission report from February 24, American fighters are no longer breaking off when forced into sustained turns. Their weapons continue firing through maneuvers that previously caused malfunctions. Advise reevaluation of engagement tactics. Stigler wasn't alone. Multiple German pilots reported similar observations. The Americans weren't flying differently. They were still using the same tactical doctrine, still executing the same defensive breaks. But their guns were working when they pulled the trigger. That changed everything. For 4 months, German pilots had fought P-51s with a predictable weakness. Pull them into hard maneuvering, force high G turns, wait for the guns to jam, then kill them. That tactic stopped working in February. German pilots who continued using it found themselves taking fire from aircraft they thought were defenseless. Major Hans Philipp, an experienced Jägerschwader commander with 206 kills, was shot down and killed on March 8, 1944, by a P-51B during a turning engagement he had initiated expecting American guns to fail. They didn't. Philipp's aircraft was hit by 47 rounds during a 3-second burst at the apex of a 7G turn. The mechanical modification that enabled that burst was a bent paperclip weighing less than half an ounce. Japanese intelligence, monitoring radio intercepts and debriefing captured American pilots, tried to determine what had changed. They examined wreckage from downed P-51s shot down in March and April, found no obvious modifications to the airframe, engine, or armament. The aircraft looked identical to the ones shot down in December and January. What they didn't find was the modification inside the feed chutes. The paperclip tensioners were small, easy to miss, and looked like debris if you didn't know exactly what you were examining. Even if German intelligence had recovered an intact feed chute assembly, they might not have understood the significance of a bent paperclip. It wasn't a technological breakthrough, wasn't a new weapon system, wasn't even a complex modification. Just a simple mechanical fix that prevented belt slack under G-loads. But that simple fix was killing their pilots. By April 1944, German fighter losses in combat with P-51s had increased 64% compared to the previous 3 months. American losses had decreased 43% during the same period. The psychological impact was significant. Luftwaffe pilots who had previously engaged American escorts aggressively were becoming cautious, defensive. They knew something had changed, but couldn't identify what. That uncertainty eroded confidence. Pilots who used to press attacks were now breaking off early, giving American fighters more freedom to protect the bomber streams. The Germans tried to adapt. Some units ordered pilots to avoid close-range turning fights with P-51s entirely, use energy tactics instead, maintain speed and altitude advantage. But that meant surrendering the one area where Bf-109s and Fw-190s had parity. Both German fighters could turn with a Mustang at lower speeds. If they gave up turning fights, they were fighting on American terms. The P-51 was faster, had better high-altitude performance, better visibility, and could take more battle damage. Other German units tried to compensate with numerical superiority. Don't engage P-51s in anything less than 3-to-1 odds. But by April, the Luftwaffe didn't have the aircraft or pilots to maintain those ratios. They were being ground down through attrition. The fundamental problem for German pilots was fighting an enemy they couldn't see. They knew American fighters were more dangerous than before. They didn't know why, and they couldn't develop effective countertactics against a modification they didn't know existed. By the end of April, the 354th Fighter Group had destroyed 94 German aircraft while losing 7 P-51s in air combat. That nearly 14-to-1 kill ratio made them the highest-scoring fighter group in the 9th Air Force. Part of that success came from experience and aggressive leadership. Part came from the P-51B's inherent capabilities. But a significant part came from a weapons system that worked when pilots needed it most. And it all came down to a bent paper clip that nobody was supposed to install. The modification never became officially authorized during the war. The Army Air Force's Engineering Command learned about it in March 1944 when a maintenance officer at 8 Fighter Command Headquarters noticed suspiciously low gun jam rates in reports from 9th Air Force P-51 squadrons. He ordered an inspection. Inspectors found the paperclip tensioners in 73 aircraft across 3 squadrons. None were documented in maintenance logs. The inspectors wrote a detailed report documenting the unauthorized modifications, complete with technical drawings and statistical analysis showing effectiveness. That report went up the chain of command and sat on desks for 5 weeks while officers debated whether to court-martial the mechanics or quietly approve the fix. The statistics were impossible to ignore. Squadrons using the modification had gun jam rates below 5%. Squadrons flying factory-standard aircraft had jam rates above 35%. The modified aircraft had kill ratios 2.4 times higher than non-modified aircraft. Pilots flying modified aircraft were surviving at significantly higher rates. In late April, North American aviation engineers were brought in to evaluate the modification. They tested it, measured stress loads, ran firing tests at Wright Field Proving Grounds. Their conclusion: the modification was safe, effective, and should have been part of the original design. The angular gun mounting had been a compromise to fit weapons in a thin wing. Nobody at the factory had adequately tested ammunition feeding under sustained high G loads because wind tunnel testing focused on aerodynamics, not armament reliability. The field mechanics had identified and solved a problem the engineers had missed. North American incorporated a similar tensioning system into the P-51D production model that entered service in June 1944. But by then, hundreds of field mechanics had already installed improvised paperclip tensioners in P-51Bs and P-51Cs throughout the European theater. Official technical orders authorizing the field modification weren't issued until July 1944, 5 months after Koenig installed the first one. By that time, it didn't matter. The modification had already spread through the fighter groups by word of mouth and direct observation. Crew chiefs showed each other how to do it. Nobody waited for official approval. Koenig never received formal recognition. No commendation, no medal, no mention in unit histories. The official North American aviation documentation attributed the feed system improvement to factory engineering analysis. Koenig's name appeared nowhere. The Army Air Forces didn't publicize field modifications that violated technical orders, even when those modifications saved lives. Doing so would have required acknowledging that regulations had prevented a life-saving fix from being implemented for months. Lieutenant Michael Hartley survived the war. He flew 89 combat missions, destroyed 9 German aircraft, returned to Ohio in September 1945, married his girlfriend from Cleveland, had 3 children, worked as a mechanical engineer for General Electric for 38 years. Every year on February 8th, Hartley sent Koenig a letter thanking him for fixing his guns. Captain Stevens also survived. He became a squadron commander, led his unit through the final year of the war in Europe, shot down 11 aircraft. After the war, he stayed in the Air Force, retired as a colonel in 1965. He made it a point to tell every maintenance officer under his command that the best solutions often come from enlisted mechanics who understand problems the engineers never see. Staff Sergeant Walter Koenig stayed in the Army Air Forces until 1946. Returned to Wisconsin, went back to working on motorcycles, opened a small repair shop in Milwaukee in 1948. He worked on engines for 44 years. Never talked much about the war. When people asked, he'd say he was a mechanic. Fixed airplanes. That's all. In 1989, an aviation historian researching P-51 armament modifications found references to unauthorized feed-chute tensioners in maintenance inspection reports from 1944. The historian tracked down Koenig through Air Force veteran registries. Koenig was 71 years old, still working part-time in his shop. The historian asked about the modification. Koenig confirmed the story, said it wasn't anything special, just something that needed doing. The historian calculated that improved gun reliability in P-51Bs during February through June 1944 likely contributed to approximately 60 additional American pilot survivals based on kill-to-loss ratio improvements and combat loss data. Koenig said he never counted. He just remembered the pilots who came back. Hartley, Stevens, the others. That was enough. Walter Koenig died in 2003 at age 85. He was buried at Wood National Cemetery in Wisconsin. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II as an aircraft mechanic with the 9th Air Force. It did not mention the bent paperclip tensioners. Did not mention that he'd modified dozens of fighter aircraft without authorization. Did not mention that his 6-minute fix changed how American fighters fought. His repair shop in Milwaukee closed in 2004. But in the back office, there was a photograph. A young mechanic in coveralls standing next to a P-51B Mustang. The tail number visible in the photo is 43 to 12,428. The date on the back is February 1944, England. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through official channels or engineering committees. Through mechanics who see problems, find solutions, and don't wait for permission to save lives. So what did you think about Koenig's decision to violate regulations to fix a problem that was killing pilots? Did this change how you see field modifications during wartime? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like. It helps more history enthusiasts discover these untold perspectives from the air war over Europe. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the moments that shaped World War II. There are so many more stories like this waiting to be told.